Welcome everyone to the fall stakeholder meeting. I'm so happy to announce that Councilmember Natasha Harper Madison will be providing some opening remarks for us.
Was that my cue?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Natasha Harper Madison here. Happy to be invited this morning. I'm a huge fan. I'm a stan for ECHO. So I'm the proud representative of District 1 on the Austin City Council. That's the district that covers East and Northeast Austin, the part of town where I was born and raised. It's also the part of town, frankly, that's no stranger to poverty. Many of us know, but it always bears repeating the story about how Austin's 1928 master plan really it was city sanctioned segregation. It explicitly segregated the city, so it effectively relocated the vast majority of Black Austinites to a 6 square mile area on the east side of town. So often you'll hear people say the 6 square, or the organization, the arts organization called 6 Square. That's where that expression comes from. It also made East Austin the place where the city would put other things that wealthier communities, wealthier, frankly, white people didn't want to see or live next to. So things like slaughterhouses, factories, service yards. I mean, we still have fleet services, service yards, and more. Through redlining, exclusionary zoning, urban renewal plan, we were denied, as a people, we were denied access to the same opportunities to build generational wealth that white Austinites enjoyed. And there's nothing wrong with prosperity, but it should be equitable. It should be shared. This is all why we're in the situation we're in today, frankly. We're in 2022, less than 1 in 10 Austinites is Black, identifies as Black, but 1 in 3 Austinites that experience unsheltered homelessness is Black. I grew up around homelessness. I have myself personally, in my formative experience and my adult life, experienced homelessness. I still see it vividly in our streets today. As I'm certain that, the stakeholders group, we're not strangers. I think it's an agonizing experience. It's far too widespread in our city. In my first year in office, I joined the majority of council members who overturned our ban on outdoor camping. My reasoning was based on the idea that we shouldn't be ticketing people who have no other place to sleep other than our streets. I don't have to tell you, the backlash was intense. It carries on today, Well, I'll just say it carries on today, unfortunately. And once the thousands of Austinites without homes came out of the shadows, out of the creeks and the brushland, the drainage pipes that they had been hiding in, many of our residents blame the council. I think some of you may know that, my spouse is a firefighter. And so for 20 years, I've heard about secret camps, fires in communities that nobody knows about. Those folks were already there. Council didn't create a problem, but, folks who have convinced themselves, who, dwell in that sort of space of othering, you can't tell them otherwise because they've already decided what the narrative is. So the fact that the people who were already there and, now housed people had to see them. I had hoped, frankly, that this would spur collectively an approach to the crisis. I mean, the unsheltered homelessness is a crisis that we all should be addressing. It's a crisis which, in my mind's eye, we don't address with the sense of urgency we should. We did have some success, a small amount of success, but ultimately our voters reinstated the camping ban. That act didn't end homelessness, but it did make it a lot less visible in certain parts of town, which I suppose that's, that was the goal. Believe me, though, it still exists, and we know what the causes are. The federal and state government have abdicated their responsibility when it comes to the social safety net. Mental health, criminalization of addiction and substance use disorders, a broken foster care system, prejudice and discrimination within the LGBTQIA plus ecosystem, atmosphere. It's it's all created a pipeline, a consistent pipeline of unsheltered homelessness. It's left counties and cities and our ever, and even rather our transit agency holding the bag, with very limited resources. Very limited resources. You sometimes hear folks say, our budget is our moral document, which, leaves me with some questions, about how we allocate our resources. High rates of unsheltered homelessness are directly correlated with high rates of housing cost. And, if you read the news, if you're listening to what's happening in Austin, right here in Austin, we are in an affordability crisis because deliberate and exclusionary zoning policies. We talked about that, or I rather talked about that earlier when I was talking about city sanctioned segregation. Those same policies that make it impossible for our scarce housing supply to really keep up with the red hot demand. That's been around since that very same city sanctioned segregation. We still operate by similar principles, in some instances, the exact same principles that explicitly divided our city. We clearly delineated where brown people and poor people live. As I've said before, it's now so bad that the forging middle class people, that are being forced to the suburbs, and working class people being forced to the streets, everybody's seeing it. Just the other day, I hosted a housing town hall at the Millennium Youth Entertainment Complex here on the Central East Side off of Rosewood and 12th Street. I met a city employee. This man has a gainfully employed individual, a full-time position with the city of Austin, with our public health department. This person pulled me aside after the meeting to tell me his story. He said he's lived here for 10 years, but recently got displaced from his apartment by way of affordability or the lack thereof. He's been couch surfing for weeks. He cannot find an affordable place to live. He told me that he's responded to several ads, but only encountered unreachable rents or, get this, predatory scammers. Housing has even become a scam. People are stealing people's money because they're so desperate for an apartment. They're handing people money sight unseen for an apartment that turns out to not be available at all. And now here they are, all that money gone. They're down again. This is the state of the Austin housing market right now, when middle-aged men with middle-class jobs have to sleep on their friends' couches. That's when we're past the point of a full-blown crisis. We can't build enough permanent supportive housing or buy hotels or expand our shelters fast enough for the chronically homeless right now. What are we going to do when people with families and jobs who aren't struggling with mental health or an abusive partner or addiction, what do we do when they can't find a roof over their heads inside the Austin city limits? I know addressing homelessness is a multi-pronged, multi-tiered effort that really does involve the city and our nonprofit partners, the county. There absolutely is no silver bullet solution. And I don't have to tell you all, especially providers, that we need to find help for people of all ages, all genders, all races. We need to address the gaps in our mental health services systems. It doesn't matter if people are diagnosed if they don't have access to their medication. Doesn't matter if people are diagnosed if they don't have access to facilities, intensive outpatient, the kind of treatment that people need. And we don't, well, no, it's true. We need to provide help to people with addiction disorders. As a community with over 40 million people who struggle, our country, over 40 million people struggle with substance use disorder. Alcohol is frankly encouraged in our society. We don't talk enough about recovery in our society, in our country, in our state, in our city. People in abusive relationships. We don't talk enough about domestic violence in our country, in our state, in our city. And people who frankly get hit by medical or family emergencies. We don't talk about how frequently that one disaster can lead you to dismay. That one disaster could leave you completely destitute. I personally had Cadillac health insurance, but could not afford my bills when my cancer disaster hit. So I know it personally, I know it well. I happen to have the type of support systems that propped us up, but we can't expect that everybody has that, which is where we are supposed to step in. The city can build more permanent supportive housing and provide those wraparound services. Our partners can operate their services in shelters and communities. We need to be proactive, though, about preventing homelessness by better investing in education, workforce training, providing an escape from the revolving door between incarceration and living on the streets. We also need to keep in mind that our homelessness crisis and our housing crisis absolutely go hand in hand. In my mind's eye, if we aren't doing all of the above, all at the same time, while also advocating for more homes of all kinds in all parts of the city, we're falling short. We're triaging gaping wounds. We already fell short when we tried to sow the seeds of injustice and inequity back in 1928. And here we are, 100 years later. I hope we can finally start to make things right. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I hope I'm able to take away something, and I hope I leave something behind. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated your words. With that, I will quickly share the agenda for everyone. Opening remarks, then we're going to go into some successes we've seen in our community in the last half year since the previous all stakeholder meeting. Then we're going to get some updates on data in our community, gaps that we're experiencing, barriers we're up against from Akram. Then Richard Johnson, co-chair of Leadership Council, will present on the roadmap, which is the guiding document for the goals of our system, of the Homelessness Response System Governing Board. And then we will go into a vote to approve the Leadership Council slate for the upcoming year. So with that, I just want to say, as we move into the successes, obviously we have a few people up ready to tell you some things that have happened broadly in our community, but I'd also like to hear if any of you have had successes you've experienced within the last 6 months or so in our homelessness response system. If you'd like to put them in the chat, I think that would be great. We can speak broadly about successes and about, system-wide things, but it's also great to hear individual stories of things going right. And so on that note, originally we were going to have Kiana Fisher speak to the national impact that the Austin Prioritization Index is having across our country. Unfortunately, she's not able to make it, so I'll be filling in. But I will say that the Austin Prioritization Index our system's sort of replacement for the VI SPDAT is having a national impact. We are having other continuum of cares reach out, other homelessness response systems reach out and ask us about it. Kiana was recently featured in the Washington Post about her work on it, and the fact that this is a national issue of people using a tool that is racist and has been favoring white people in homelessness response systems for housing and intervention. So using that tool, using the VI SPDAT, we saw greater disparities in scores by race, with white clients scoring the highest. With the Austin Prioritization Index, there are less disparities overall, and we have Black and Hispanic clients scoring higher than white clients, which is good because the disparities are the greatest there, as we see in our community, as compared to those experiencing homelessness. And we need to be equitable with the way that we approach our system, knowing that these systems that feed into homelessness are racist, and we have to do what we can to combat the infrastructure that is causing these disproportionate rates. It is still an iterative process, and this is something that we stress as people reach out to us, that it's something that is ongoing. We have recently looked at 5 new questions that we're considering putting into pilot, questions that have been in pilot and may be adopted, expansions or tweaks to old questions based on information we've gotten about them. It's very much a homegrown process built by our community, built for our community. And this is something that we stress when we talk to partners from New Jersey and Virginia and Hawaii. On Thursday, Claire and I will be speaking with San Diego. So I like to say that the impact is coast to beyond coast, with, from New Jersey to Hawaii. With communities that are reaching out to us to see the extraordinary work we're doing and restructuring the way that we prioritize people for housing in Austin. It is having an impact nationally, and it's incredibly exciting to see. So on that note, I will pass it to Alessandra Dominguez to talk about the Austin Street Outreach Collaborative.
Thanks, Summer. Hey, everybody, I'm Alessandra Dominguez. I'm going to go over a quick overview of the Austin Street Outreach Collaborative, or what we call it, ASOC. So quickly, overview of what ASOC is an initiative to seek to build stronger infrastructure for sustainable, data-driven, and racial equitable service delivery in our Austin Travis County homeless response system. This initiative wouldn't be possible without the generous donation of the St. David's Foundation. And with that, we were creating that to create 12 full-time positions to help with gaps in our system. Those positions would be for mobile street outreach, more community assessment assessors in the community for greater access, as well as SOAR specialists in the community. SOAR specialists help individuals apply for SSI, SSDI benefits. Now to our awardees. Our 3 awardees were awarded the money in April, so we're exactly at 3 months. Our first one is Urban Alchemy. Although they may be new to our community, they are not new to the work. They will be focusing on North Austin area, Runberg, as well as the criminal justice area. They are currently going through training, learning how Austin Travis County homeless response system does data entry in HMIS, and they will have dedicated outreach providers completing coordinated assessments, as well as a SOAR specialist. Our second awardee is We Can Now. They are definitely not new to our community, but are new to the larger continuum of care of Austin Travis County. They are dedicating their area to the east side of Austin, as well as North Austin and Pflugerville, kind of where Travis County still hits in that area. They will also have a mixture of street outreach individuals, two-store specialists, as well as coordinated assessment staff. They are currently completing training and learning and getting familiar with HMIS and all the wonderful HUD data standards that come with that. So we're looking forward to their growth there. Our third awardee is Sunrise Navigation Center. They were our most established provider in the community that is both in the homeless response system and the continuum of care, completing coordinated assessments. And now awarded with the ASOC funding, they have been able to increase their coverage in the community. Historically, they have been in the South Austin area, Manchac, and have expanded to Barton Springs, filling gaps in the downtown area, as well as a hotline service as well. They have already been trained and are completing coordinated assessments, and as well as have had several successful diversion successes. Each provider was also divvied up $500,000 for direct assistance for people experiencing homelessness to help with the intervention of self-resolution, diversion, and rapid exit. Those are interventions that allow an individual to help end their homelessness without using more traditional housing options, right? That we know that we have lack of those resources, and using different interventions allow for people to end their homelessness a lot quicker. We are all very excited to see their growth with this money, but as well as filling the gaps in our community and making the homeless response system even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. I'm going to hop in because Summer is a little under the weather and maybe coughing off camera or getting some tea. So next we have JP from the Austin Justice Coalition giving us an update on some exciting PSH wins coming our way.
In the same vein, with my being a little bit under the weather and Kiana's internet connection being shaky, I think JP just messaged me that he is experiencing similar issues. So I will do my best again to fill in for him, even though, as with the API being really, I think, Kiana's baby, the Katie Lofts win was absolutely the incredible work of JP and AJC in rallying our community towards really working towards a common goal of ensuring that we have more PSH. Oh, all right. I think JP might have connected. So with that introduction, I'd like to hopefully pass it over to Joao Paulo himself to speak to this incredible work. Hey, JP, I think if you want to speak to the Katie Lofts, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. My connection is a little bit unstable. I'm traveling right now. Do you want me to just start from the beginning, or have I missed a piece of the Katie Lofts conversation, or should I just...
No, I was just gassing you up, so go ahead from the beginning.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry to keep everyone hanging there for a sec. I'll just make this a quick, sort of summary, but most of all, just to express appreciation for many of the groups who are here on the call and many who aren't, who were part of joining us in organizing to help defend Katie Lofts. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what happened, although it's got quite a bit of coverage now, it is a project proposed 9% tax credit development of single room occupancy, 100 units of single room occupancy permanent supportive housing being provided by an affordable housing developer here in Austin in a location which is the Hancock neighborhood, which is a central location west of I-35, very close to the community care clinic and grocery stores, and it's close to the high frequency bus lines that we have going downtown. This proposal was one that we immediately recognized as a very important proposal for our response system, and also a very teachable moment in Austin where we could highlight how often these projects, these developments face real uphill battles in Austin. They have to go through the planning commission, and then the neighborhood, of course, can always collect enough signatures, which the Hancock neighborhood did, collect enough signatures for a valid petition, which then requires a 9-vote supermajority of city council in order to pass. So this case really was about highlighting the fact that often, we hear, it was about defending these units of housing that we need so desperately, and highlighting the fact that often we hear people say, well, if we're raising all this money and the city is talking about making a plan and we're trying to end homelessness, why don't we just build housing already, damn it? And all too often people don't realize how much of an uphill battle it is to build housing in Austin, particularly when you're building housing for lower income folks. So, huge shout out to Echo, who collaborated very closely with AJC on advocating and championing this project. Shout out also to Sunrise, the Other Ones Foundation, We Can Now, a whole coalition of groups that came together to say, we absolutely need this project and we're ready to defend it. We did all kinds of things. We took out an ad in the Chronicle. We went to the Hancock neighborhood and knocked on doors and talked to the neighbors, talked to everyone in the neighborhood that we could find and reach with the limited time and resources that we had. We spoke to the folks who were in opposition of the project. We spoke to the neighborhood association that had passed a resolution with over 87% voting to oppose the Katie Lofts development. We spoke to the folks in the neighborhood who had collected enough signatures for a valid petition to oppose the project. We also spoke to our city council members. I think Natasha and Glenn, folks here on the call, attest to the fact that we wanted to rally absolutely everyone behind this project and make it sort of a united statement from all of Austin, including our mayoral candidates, including our county judge, get everyone on board and everyone saying the same thing in unison, which is we need this kind of project and we can't afford to lose even one of these developments. And we're ready to fight for them. So, thanks to all of the support and organizing, we were able to have a very lively planning commission meeting, which was probably one of the more exciting planning commission meetings, I think, in the recent history of Austin. At least it was encouraging because there was a large showing of folks, including many, many folks from the neighborhood, who spoke in support for the project. It passed unanimously at the Planning Commission. And then we had a really unique opportunity to sit down again, talk to the folks from the Hancock neighborhood. And we actually had the Hancock neighborhood revise. The Hancock neighborhood chose to revise their position, no longer in opposition to the project. And also the petition that they had collected signatures for, they had enough signatures for a valid petition, and they chose not to file that petition, which was a huge win. And it also showed us that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in how we communicate with neighborhoods and how we message about these projects and how we address some of the stereotypes and stigmas around housing for people who are experiencing homelessness. And, and also I think the framing, right? So we knocked on doors and we told folks, at AJC, we're really excited about this beautiful new project that's going to be housing for 100 people. And did you know that permanent supportive housing is extremely successful with very low turnover rates, and it's a very stable community, and there's going to be support and so on. And the more we talked about it, and the more we answered people's questions and helped address their fears and concerns, we realized that really there was a lot of support and enthusiasm for this kind of project, even in the neighborhood. That's not to say that it's all kumbaya. I think that we have to be aware of the fact that there's going to be more battles like this coming, that getting housing built in Austin is not easy. We need to continue to say and affirm that, it's absurd that something like this should even have to be fought for, that we even should have to go to the planning commission and put in all this work to defend 100 units of permanent supportive housing when, as a city, we all have agreed this is a priority, is absurd, right? We shouldn't even have had to do that kind of organizing to begin with. So that's all I'm going to say, but a huge shout out to everyone who made that possible. And it really was a victory, and it was a messaging victory. And I am just very appreciative of the coalition that made it happen. So thank you all. And I think that's kind of what the spirit of this all stakeholder meeting is. Getting everyone together, everyone on the same page. If we can unite and make demands and fight together for things, I think we can accomplish some amazing stuff together. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, JP. The work that you did was really incredible with rallying everyone together to overcome and meet that uphill battle where it was. With that, I'd like to pass it to Rochelle and Nathan from the county to speak to the Supporting Housing Collaborative.
Hey everyone, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Have a really short slide deck to get through. And thanks so much for all the great conversation so far. So I just briefly wanted to go over some of the county's investments in supportive housing and affordable housing. Again, my name is Nathan Fernandez. I'm a planner in Travis County's Health and Human Service team that's been working on this supportive housing resolution investment. I know that JP and the folks at Austin Justice Coalition and a lot of other stakeholders in this group really organized and advocated for this funding to be earmarked for supportive and affordable housing last year. So we're really grateful for the community's advocacy efforts in getting these funds from the American Rescue Plan Act to have this be prioritized for supportive housing and affordable housing. So I just wanted to go over some of the goals and some of the services that the $110 million earmarked funds will be going towards. The resolution was passed in September of last year to earmark these funds, and we're currently in the thick of getting these funds in place and working with all the great nonprofits and their site partners to establish some of these structures and the development and construction of a lot of these affordable housing complexes. So an overarching goal that most of our contractors and partners are agreeing to try to accomplish is to protect and provide opportunity for those most vulnerable and underrepresented, which is, I think, a great goal for everyone in Central Texas to undertake in this conversation. And some of the sub goals that they will be looking to achieve as well is, as evident by this call, ensuring a robust cross-sector approach to addressing homelessness, promoting the availability and access to safe, affordable, and stable housing, and reducing the criminal justice system interactions for individuals impacted by homelessness by providing the increased access to housing. And some of the service types that have been mentioned on the call already that we are using to fund with this $110 million are, of course, permanent supportive housing, but as Councilmember Harper Madison so eloquently pointed out, also increasing the volume of affordable housing as well as emergency housing, including temporary or transitional residence for people experiencing homelessness. For example, the Esperanza community that someone mentioned, the Other Ones Foundation has been a great advocate in these conversations. They're working to build structures and shelter-like confines for the people who have been living in their facility for quite some time. So just to go over some of the projects and the nonprofits that are involved in this $110 million investment, Foundation Communities, with the exception of Foundation Communities, Mobilos and Fishes, and the Other Ones Foundation, the rest of the 7 organizations are organized as a collaborative. They'll be working on individual developments and investments, but they are coming to us as a united front, which is a great approach in helping us assign this funding and get through the very complicated work it takes to establish this funding, and especially with the construction of a lot of these huge projects. So a few of them you may know about pretty well. Of course, the Mobilos and Fishes Community First Village. As I mentioned, the Other Ones Foundation Esperanza Community and Foundation Communities is taking on the Burleson and Juniper Creek Village apartment complexes. And we also included a little map here on the right of the tentative sites for a lot of these developments. We say tentative because, as JP also mentioned, there can be backlash and response from communities and neighbors that object to these types of developments in their areas. So that is a fluid process, but we're working very closely with the site partners and everyone else in the community to make sure that these sites are being established and that construction can start as soon as possible. But as I'm sure most of you can see right away, most of these sites are east of I-35, and that continues to be a trend in terms of affordable housing developments and everything the county and the city are working towards, that a lot of those developments do tend to fall on the east side of 35. And last but not least, just wanted to provide a general overview of some of the summary of housing units that we currently know these funds will employ in the future. So total housing units, excluding the Other Ones Foundation structural shelter units, will equal almost 3,000, 2,880 to be precise. Across these almost 3,000, almost 1,100 of them, 38%, will be dedicated to the homelessness response continuum of care. And we are grateful to ECHO and their ability to work with all these different organizations to describe how that will work. And Matt will be presenting to the Travis County Commissioners Court, I believe in a month from now, to get into more detail about how these projects will work with the continuum of care. And then including the affordable units, 71% of these units will be marked and rated as affordable. So not just homelessness response, but also making affordable housing units a priority over the lifespan of these contracts. And then there will be market rate units involved. That's about 29% at this point. A lot of those do help make the projects viable over a long-term process, but the vast majority of the units will be dedicated to homelessness and affordable housing responses. So that's pretty much all I had. We can definitely answer any questions if anybody has them. I know Rochelle's in the chat as well. So thanks all for the opportunity and for all the support from the community.
There is one question from Linda Jackson. What is considered affordable? We are working with each of these contracts in the process of determining the percentages of each of the units that should be within 3 levels of what we're calling affordability. And maybe while I'm talking, Nathan, I don't know if you can pull that up, but it is so we are embedding in the contract boilerplate. And this right now is a draft and would need to be tailored to each of the projects. But as of right now, we are wanting to see projects to have at least 60% of their units to be 80% below AMI. And then it staggers from there. It's like 60%, below 80% AMI, 40% below 60% AMI, 10% below 20% AMI. And so we do have a scaffolding of units dedicated in this affordability range. We are happy to provide that in a little. We're happy to send that to Summer, and she can distribute that as needed. But as of right now, that is still something in draft form, and it hasn't been finalized. I will say that the county is very risk averse, and these funds are coming from the SLFR U.S. Treasury dollars. And so the contracting is very, it is very much, we are very much interested in protecting these public dollars and making sure that we are ensuring affordability as much as possible, and that these projects are viable and sustainable for the future.
And I saw Linda ask a question about the dollar amount. I can definitely share the area median family income for the Austin Round Rock metropolitan statistical area, but that dollar amount will change year over year depending on the recommendations from the census data and as well as the home regulations. So I'll post that site in the chat, but that number will change year over year as everything we know increases.
Thank you so much, Nathan and Rochelle. Really appreciate all your work on this. And so on that note, with all of these new units coming in, with the work that is being done by grassroots orgs to make sure that they are able to fight that uphill battle with everything going on with our national impact, all of that in mind, I would like to pass it over to Akram and the research and evaluation team to go over some data from our community.
Thanks, Summer. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces on my screen. My name is Akram Al-Turk. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at ECHO, and with me today are Claire Burris, Research and Evaluation Manager at ECHO, and Chris Murray, Research and Evaluation Analyst at ECHO, and we are the research and evaluation team at the three of us comprise our team. And we're going to be presenting today on local data. I think it very much complements what's already been said and some of the, I think some of the things that have already been discussed. So I'm looking forward to presenting some of this. Let me see if I can. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, I will pass it over to Claire.
All right, thank you, Akram. Nice to be with everyone today. So just a brief outline of our presentation today. First, we'll start with some contextual community data, really what are we seeing in our community right now that could be having an impact on some of the trends that we're seeing within homelessness. Then we'll get into population and system data for the community experiencing homelessness and involved in homeless services in 2021. Then we will touch on what are the current system needs today and what are the current system gaps today. And then hopefully we can have some time to open it up for some Q&A and discussion. So I am so grateful to have heard from some of our partners and other stakeholders today in this meeting, particularly Councilmember Harper Madison touched on some of this content that we'll cover in this section. So one thing that we just really want to ground everybody in before we go into the data is that our rent prices are spiking here in Austin. And this is not news to anyone, but just as a visualization here, this is the seasonally adjusted average rent in Austin from beginning of 2014 to just last month. And so as we can see here, rent has been steadily increasing for the most part over this whole period, but we've seen a dramatic increase within the past year that is really unprecedented within the past 10 years or so. Another thing that's very important to think about when it comes to people who are at risk of homelessness is housing cost burden for people who are considered to be extremely low income renters. And so here we are looking at a comparison across the major metro areas in Texas. And over the past, since about 2010, Austin has consistently, for the most part, had a higher rate of, or a higher percent of the population of extremely low income renters that are experiencing severe housing cost burden. And so what this means is that more than 50% of their income is going toward housing and utilities. And this is for people who make less than 30% of the area median income. And so the median incomes differ in all of these different areas, and what the cost of that housing differs in all of these different areas. But here we're getting to just see that, you know, we're up there, we have been up there as our rent prices continue to increase the way we saw on the last slide. This is something that is likely to continue into the future just because of the impact of the cost of rent on this dynamic. Another thing that Councilmember Harper Madison touched on is the risk that eviction filings pose to the population experiencing homelessness, and how we may see that evictions cause a rise in the population experiencing homelessness in Austin. And this is definitely something that we're concerned about, that the data shows is already beginning to happen throughout 2022 so far. So we did see a dip in eviction filings during the moratorium. And as we moved into 2022, we're seeing that the impact of that policy really shows with this U-shaped curve from 2020 to 2022. And more people are being evicted now. And so we think that this is probably going to have kind of a delayed reaction on what we see in the data for the population experiencing homelessness. And this is something that we're planning to keep a very close eye on. The last thing we want to touch on in this section is all of the other factors other than evictions that contribute to the risk of somebody, the vulnerability that somebody has to experiencing homelessness, either for the first time or returning to homelessness after having experienced it a prior time. And so here we have looked at the zip codes where people experiencing homelessness in our system have reported as where they fell into homelessness, as well as poverty rates, lack of health insurance, mental health issues, unemployment, gentrification, rent burden, and then overcrowding within rental units. And so all of these factors together can be incorporated into this kind of vulnerability index of experiencing homelessness. And as we can see here, the East Austin crescent around that kind of wraps around from the Runberg area down to Southeast Austin, kind of around downtown, is where we see the highest risk, highest vulnerability to people falling into homelessness. And so this is a geographic element that we also need to be cognizant of when thinking about trying to prevent homelessness and slow the growth of the population experiencing homelessness in Austin.
Okay, this next section is going to go over some of the high-level overviews of the data that we're seeing regarding the population experiencing homelessness as recorded in HMIS over the past calendar year. So these data come from HMIS, and they encompass all people who interacted with or enrolled in a program with an HMIS participating agency in 2021, or if they enrolled in a program before 2021 and had not, as of the end of 2021, exited that program. So an example of this would be rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing projects. Like if a client had entered the project before that and they were active in the project in the calendar year of 2021, then they are included in this data. And so we are doing this to be to capture the broadest amount of people possible and to be as accurate as possible. So some brief highlights of what we're seeing is 23,437 enrollments or interactions with the system. So these are not unique clients. These are enrollments in programs and services. So an example of this could be one client could be enrolled in an outreach project, potentially several times if that's an enrollment and an exit for each service provided. Perhaps they stayed at a shelter multiple times or several shelters and were also enrolled in a rapid rehousing or PSH project. So that 23,000 number is the number of total enrollments and interactions with the system in 2021. And below that is where we see the unique individuals. So that was 13,208 individuals, which comes out to around 10,000 households. So a household could have multiple individuals involved in that household. And then that is between all 13 of the project types, which include emergency shelter, street outreach, and our permanent housing projects like Rapid and PSH. So there were a total of 202 projects that were involved in this data. So in 2021, 58.2 of our clients identified as male, and 41.5% of our clients identified as female, and 0.3 did not singularly identify as male or female. And so this total number was 12,919 clients. In 2021, we did not have a separate category for transgender clients. So if a transgender client identified as male, they are being counted as male. If a transgender client identifies as female, they are being counted as female. So the percentage of clients who did report identifying or being transgender was 0.5%, which was about 1 in 180. For age, we saw a decrease in the median age by 4 years. The previous median age from 2020 had been 38, and this year, in 2021, the median age is 34. So about a third of these clients are under 25 or under, and then about a fourth are aged 50 and above, and then about 5% are 65 or above. And so regarding the household size, we mentioned earlier that sometimes we have households that are single individuals, and then sometimes households made up of multiple individuals, and this is the further breakdown of that. So the majority of the household sizes that we see are those single individual households, which was 84.7% of this sample. And so that the 2 to 3 member households made up 10.5%. And then the 4 or more member households were 4.8%. So the largest majority of our households are single member households. In the breakdown of the subpopulations that are recognized by HUD, and one note here is that these are not mutually exclusive, so people can be in multiple of these subpopulations, but the largest we see is the chronically homeless subpopulation at 37%, followed by domestic violence survivors at 34%, and then families with children at 13%, unaccompanied youth at 13%, and then veterans at 11%. This was largely comparable to last year, although the chronically homeless subpopulation, as well as the families with children, both decreased by 4 percentage points. This chart is showing a comparison between the percent of clients in Travis County who report being a specific race or ethnicity and the percent of clients experiencing homelessness recorded in HMIS who report being a specific race or ethnicity. So the two key things to look for in reading this type of chart, this is a dumbbell chart, is the length between the two ends of the dumbbell, as well as which color of the dumbbell is further to the right. So further to the right along that bottom x-axis is a higher percentage, and then closer to the left is going to be a smaller percentage. So if you look at the top category, the white population, you can see that that red end, the Travis County end, is 49%. So 49% of white people make up 49% of the Travis County population, and they make up 27% of the population experiencing homelessness. So if you look down below that at the Black race category, you can see that there's also a larger disparity there, but the ends of the dumbbell are in reverse. So whereas white people are making up 49% of Travis County and 27% of people experiencing homelessness, Black people are making up only 9% of Travis County, but 32% of people experiencing homelessness. And so that's noted. This is the disparity that we have been seeing in the homelessness response system overall. And so you can see that the Hispanic and Latinx race and ethnicity category is also a relatively high percentage of people experiencing homelessness at 32%. The distinction between that category and the Black category, for example, is that there is less of a disparity. So significantly less of a disparity. So the other most notable disparity we saw was that per the ACS census data for Travis County and the HMIS data, the Asian population appears to have a small disparity in which they are less represented in the homelessness response system than they are in the Travis County population, but not nearly so much as the white population. And so all of these slides, as a brief aside, will be in two upcoming reports that ECHO will be putting out, so that all of this information will be publicly available in the upcoming weeks. And in this particular slide, you'll see shared between the Needs and Gaps report that we're putting out and the Racial Disparities report that we will be putting out. And then lastly, for this section, a few more demographic insights. So regarding race and gender, Native and Indigenous, Pacific Islander, and white clients are disproportionately identifying as male. And then Hispanic and Latinx clients are disproportionately identifying as female. Regarding race and age, over half of Black clients and about 2/3 of Hispanic and Latinx clients are under 35. And then approximately 2/3 of white clients are over 35. And then regarding household types, nearly 1/2 of Hispanic Latinx clients are members of family households with children, whereas white clients are disproportionately less likely than other racial and ethnic groups to be members of family households with children.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So now we want to present a few slides on kind of piggybacking off of the population data that we just presented to kind of really focus on the system level data, and in particular, focusing on our permanent housing programs. So as Chris stated earlier, there are about 200 projects in HMIS and our centralized database here locally. And about 50 of them, or about a quarter of those, are rapid rehousing programs. So that does make up a good chunk of our programming here locally. Another big chunk is composed of services only. So those are projects that provide services, but not permanent housing or housing services. And then another big chunk of programs are our permanent supportive housing programs, PSH. So that's another 25 programs or so, or projects or so. And so this gives you the distribution. I won't go through all of them, but did want to point out that there is a considerable number of projects in our system that are permanent housing projects. And so what does that translate to? And this is a slide that shows the number of people who move into rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing units in the last 3 years. And so one of the takeaways here is that this is relatively a stable number of folks who move into these rapid rehousing and PSH over the last 3 years. We saw a slight, a good increase in 2020, and then in 2021, we saw a slight decrease. As you can see here, around 1,000 people move into rapid rehousing in each of these years. Another 180 to 200 folks move into permanent supportive housing in a given year. And then the other thing that we also track is how many people exit the system. And this is, I think, another important distinction between being in a program, but also then exiting that program into permanent housing. So we also track people who may only receive, minimal housing assistance. So that might be they go to an emergency shelter, day shelter, or they have an outreach conversation, or they self-resolve their homelessness with limited support. And so an additional 600 or so folks exit the system, move into permanent housing with a little bit of help from the homelessness response system each year. So that translates to about 1,800 to 2,000 people each year. One of the things we want to point out here is that while this is, I think these numbers are, kind of reflective of the great work that is being done by many of the service providers here locally, there are major challenges to housing people. One of the things that we look at quite a bit is how long it takes someone to go through the homelessness response system, from the time they become homeless to the time they take a coordinated assessment, and so their housing needs are identified until they actually move into a housing unit. And you can see here in the first bullet point on the right-hand side that the average time between when someone takes their most recent coordinated assessment and when they move into housing is almost 8 months. And so that means that, for folks who maybe have taken multiple coordinated assessments, that number is higher. And so it may be that they're waiting over a year to be able to move into housing. As you can see here, at least almost 50% of people who eventually move into a permanent housing slot, or a permanent housing unit, have to wait at least 6 months. And again, so that's from their most recent coordinated assessment. And then another 17% have to wait at least a year. And so again, these are, I guess, conservative estimates because, again, this is just for folks who actually move into housing. So there's another, a chunk of folks who are not getting a referral, or who do not enroll in a program, or who do not move into housing. And so, that this shows us some of the challenges that we have in the system for housing people and have people moving into permanent housing. Given those challenges, one of the things we wanted to show is, the capacity changes that we anticipate seeing, and we have seen in the last few months. These numbers are not quite final, the 2022 numbers, but wanted to show that something that I think is a positive trend here is that we are seeing an increase in the capacity that we have for permanent housing projects, which includes permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. So as you can see here in the middle of the slide, you can see the two permanent housing programs. We are seeing an increase in capacity. So this will increase the available beds that are, or the beds that are available for people to move into permanent housing. I think that's a great development and very much needed, because as one of the other thing that we track regularly is the number of people who are experiencing unsheltered and sheltered homelessness. And as Council Member Harper Madison mentioned earlier, it's possible that the visibility of homelessness has changed recently, but that does not mean that people are no longer experiencing homelessness. And so, based on our by name list, based on the shelter enrollments that we have in HMIS, we're seeing that unfortunately there's an upward trend in unsheltered homelessness and sheltered homelessness. And so this first slide shows the increase in unsheltered homelessness over the last year and a half or so. So we estimate about 2,500, 2,600 people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And another 900 or so are enrolled in a shelter program, whether that's emergency shelter, transitional housing, or safe haven. So putting these things together, that we have increased, or that our that we house, the system helps support the housing of about 1,800 to 2,000 people a year. And that that our permanent housing programs are oftentimes at capacity. So rapid rehousing, we see 100% utilization rate consistently in those programs. Permanent supportive housing is also really high utilization rate, or has a high utilization rate. Given that, we wanted to kind of estimate here, based on the number of people who we think are currently experiencing homelessness, what are their needs and what do we need more of? And so based on the API, the Austin Prioritization Index, which is our coordinated assessment here locally, based on people's coordinated assessment scores, their, whether they are chronically homeless or whether they have a disabling condition, and whether they're living unsheltered or sheltered. We've tried to here show you what we estimate as the relative needs of folks by household type. We think it's important to break it down by household type. And so one of the things we see here is, as you can see, that around 1,000 households in early 2022 have very high needs. Single adult households have very high needs. Another 600 households that are also single-headed have high needs. And so you can see the breakdown here, but I think how we are looking at this is that the very high needs are folks who probably need permanent supportive housing, who need not just the housing services, but the wraparound services that can provide them stability long-term. We think that folks in the high category probably require rapid rehousing, and so that maybe need 1 or 2 years of rental assistance to get them on their feet. And then medium, relatively speaking, that they may need less than PSH or rapid rehousing. They could probably benefit from those, but maybe maybe something like diversion or rapid exit would be helpful for those folks. So this just gives you kind of a sense of that breakdown based on the data that we have. One other thing we wanted to look at, and I'll wrap up this section with this, is that we also wanted to look at not just how someone scores on the coordinated assessment, but do they have income when they enroll in a program? Do they have benefits like SSI or SSDI or health insurance? And one of the things that we consistently see is that a majority of folks, in particular, again, single adults, but also families with children, do not have one or more of these services or one or more of these benefits or income sources. The bottom panel here, the bottom section of this graph, I think, is also telling, and it shows that about 1/3 of single adults experiencing homelessness do not have any of these benefits or any income, any benefit, or any health insurance. And I think it just reinforces that that we do need to provide services above and beyond, oftentimes, just a housing unit. So just to wrap all of this up and to kind of talk about the highlights of what we think the system needs are, as I think you can tell from both the beginning of our presentation, where we talked about the community level indicators and the system indicators and measures, that there is limited capacity and bottlenecks in the system. The number of housing units has gone up in recent years, but based on the numbers that I've shown you, it's just simply not enough. We've got an increasingly unaffordable rental market that makes it very difficult to house people, even after they have been referred into a program or enroll in a program. It is often difficult for them to then move into a housing unit. And then, prolonged unsheltered homelessness, which, the majority of people experiencing homelessness in Austin experience unsheltered homelessness, is correlated with negative health outcomes, including, death on the streets, and makes it harder for someone to exit homelessness. That's why I think that we also see a high number of people who experience chronic homelessness here in Austin, more so than in other parts of the country. And so that makes it harder to address homelessness in the long run. So what do we need? We need more permanent housing capacity, and then we're seeing some increases in that, but not enough. We also think that we need more homelessness prevention. As we looked at the map of Austin and tried to identify where people are at risk of becoming homeless, we really need to be able to focus on trying to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, and that's particularly true for Black people here in Austin, who are more likely to experience homelessness than compared to any other racial or ethnic group. And so here are some links to some other information that we put out, and we're happy to answer any questions. I don't know, Summer, if we've got any time for Q&A, but we're happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anyone has questions, this is the all stakeholder meeting. It is for all the stakeholders. If you have questions for Ackerman team, feel free to ask. Linda, I see your hand is raised, and then Andrew.
Hi, I have a specific question, and I realize that rates change, but I'm thinking about the rate right now today for a one-bedroom apartment. Say if someone's looking for a one-bedroom apartment in affordable housing, and they make 30% of the median income, what would their rent cost according to y'all's charts and graphs and all that? The way you figure it.
I'm not sure I could give you an answer off the top of my head for that. I think we can, and maybe the county folks can help with that. But we can certainly kind of, I think Claire has done that analysis in the past. I think we've done that, and we've kind of looked at how much someone who's making, for example, minimum wage, how many hours they would have to work to be able to afford the average rent in Austin. And so we can certainly kind of put something together and send that to you if you'd like. If someone else has something off the top of their head, I'd love that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like for that to be part of the discussion, is that amount. I truly would, because 30% is $22,000 a year. At my estimate, and I found out that my median income was calculated at 75, and I just found out that it's even possibly 110. So,
right, and I appreciate that question, Linda, and I think if you're seeking a number for what's considered to be affordable, and how the pricing for affordable housing units is set, I think that's something that we, like our team, research and evaluation at ECHO, would have less information on. But if we want to have a conversation about what a reasonable threshold should be and what we might recommend, I think that's something that we would be able to talk through a little bit more. And I appreciate that question, and that gives us information about what people are looking for from us. So thank you.
Quick question. I know that you went over the number of households that are exiting to permanent housing, as well as the ones that have entered into rapid or PSH projects. Do we have an idea of the number or amount of individuals comparatively to those numbers that are exiting the system to unknown destinations?
We do have that, yeah. I don't know what that number is. And again, that's something we could look at. I think in the needs and gaps we are looking at, we always look at, exits to permanent housing from, it's exit to a permanent housing destination from a permanent housing intervention, or, when they enroll in a rapid or PSH. So we can look at, we often do look at whether they return to homelessness or whether maybe we don't know where they exited to. So we can look at that. We know that that rate is higher for people who exit emergency shelter, though we don't know where they exit to. That's, I think, a function of just data entry and a little bit of a more kind of challenging environment. But we can definitely look at that and send you something.
And then it looks like we have a question from Emily Seals in the chat. So I think the question is, what is the percentage of those who complete a coordinated assessment who do not have an accepted housing referral into one of our housing programs?
Yeah, I think we ran that number recently. I think, Maya, we sent that to you maybe at some point. I don't know for which meeting, but I think it was close to 25% of folks who take a coordinated assessment do get an accepted referral. And so, yes, I think that 75% is accurate, Emily.
Yes, Cassandra.
I believe, like, I forgot what date it was, but Linda was in the what's it called? The meeting too. It was several meetings back, I believe, like it was in the beginning of this month or somewhat middle of last month with the Encampment and Crisis Response meeting, where we were talking about how some of these housing agencies are getting revisioned or revitalized or something, basically restructured in some sort of way. I'm trying to figure out, because of that, a lot of policies are changing and everything else. And because of the housing market, is anything really going to have an efficient point where, oh, we're going to be able to meet everyone's needs, or is it going to be a more of a gap? Because the gap, I know for sure, is like 6 months up to a year to be able to get into these housings. Is the
question, what is the need in our community?
Is he gonna close the gap, or is it gonna expand that gap into even a larger waiting time?
Is the question what is needed in our community to reach functional zero in terms of number of units?
Yes and no. I'm just trying to figure out, because of the waiting period, basically. Is it gonna be a shorter waiting period after a certain amount of time when things are, I don't know how to really explain it. Is basically, is there gonna be a wider gap after a longer period of times, or is it gonna change over a period of time?
Yeah, so I think, Cassandra, thank you for this question. And I think if you're referring to expansions in the capacity of the system, this is something that we're anticipating that will continue to get more units coming online in our system within the near future. And there's lots of efforts in place to fundraise for those and increase that capacity that are already in motion. And so once we get more units, I suppose theoretically, although we can't exactly project exactly how this will change, but theoretically, wait times should decrease because there will be more units to put people in. And right now, a large part of the reason why people have to wait so long is that housing programs are trying to find a unit to place someone in. And so we are hopeful that that wait time will not continue to increase or will not remain as long as it is right now. And that's definitely one of the major concern areas in the system that we're trying to focus on system-wide, is how to shorten that.
Thank you. So I think there is one more question in the chat. I will ask, for the sake of time, that if anyone has more questions, you put them in the chat, and hopefully Akram and the research and evaluation team are able to answer them there. We're going to move on to Richard Johnson presenting on the roadmap for the Austin Travis County Homelessness Response System governance.
I'm here to go over the governance roadmap for the homeless response team. This can also be found on the ECHO website. So the Homeless Response System Leadership Council is here to ensure that Austin and Travis County has a strong homeless response system that is based in evidence-informed practices and meets the needs of those experiencing homelessness. Moving along, the document outlines HUD requirements for Leadership Council as well as HRS systems. The goal for the 2022 following year, following these goals, are prioritized tasks that are identified as needed to meet the goals and tasks that will be developed collaboratively between Leadership Council and community members. So moving down here a little bit. So this document is put together in coordinates with HUD requirements and the continuum of care, and adopting the following a written process to select Leadership Council. What else do I need to cover here? It's overseeing and approving work committees and work groups, serving the primary decisions-making body for the Austin Travis County continuum of care funding, providing oversight, funds, and ensuring all COC funded agencies will fulfill their responsibilities as assigned. So some of the goals that we have listed here for the 2022 year is establish a system which Black people are now or are no more likely to be experiencing homelessness, eliminating the current disparities in homelessness rates by race in our community, increase the voice of people with lived experience for homelessness in setting systems level policies and goals. We also ensure that funding is equitably awarded. And again, this is all can be found on the ECHO website. So some of the work groups we have: compensation, governance, and funding alignment. And moving on to governments and governance committees, crisis response. Identify the needs and gaps, pre-coordinated entry, and street outreach leading to coordinated assessments. Another one, working groups, outreach and engagement, crisis beds, encampment response, and inclement weather shelters, which we really need to heavily focus on due to what we saw last year in the earlier part of the year in the winter, and now again here in the summer months where it's extremely hot out and places are a little bit more difficult to get into, even though it's hot outside and people are in need of shelter and cooling off stations. The other thing that we are looking forward to is permanent housing, as we've been discussing most of this morning. Create community strategy for managing and centralized housing profile. Work groups, again, priority engagement, development, rapid rehousing. Just to name a few, Violence Against Women Act. And moving on to equity, the task, ensure increase in referrals, successes of Black households in the HRS, moving forward a system in which Black people are no more likely to be experiencing homelessness, eliminating the current disparities in homelessness rates by race in our community. Work group policies, trainings, professional development, tools, and PLE support space, and API development. Performance monitoring task of 2022, create systems, processes, and policies that promote data-driven program evaluation, continuance, improvement through accountability and transparency. It's very important that we in this space remain very transparent in the workings that we do and supporting those experiencing homelessness. System improvements. Purpose of the HRS understands that ending homelessness requires robust support services and true collaborative between complex systems. Working alongside with others that are in this same area of work and continuing to support those that are experiencing homelessness in any way possible. Work groups and capacity building, health and substance use, which is becoming extremely difficult with the limitations that have been presented by state government and some federal government. So making sure that we're out there, a voice for those experiencing those concerns. That's pretty much it. If I missed anything, I apologize. And again, this is all available on the ECHO website.
Thank you so much, Richard. This is available under the supporting documents on the Leadership Council page on the ECHO website, which you can find in the link I'm putting in the chat. And if any of these committees sound like something you'd like to be a part of, we have a calendar with all of our meetings available at this link. So on that note, I would like to pass it to Maya to facilitate renewing the Slate for Leadership Council for 2022.
Thanks, Summer. So we have, as part of our governance charter, an annual community vote in this all stakeholders meeting to confirm the slate of Leadership Council members for the next year. So we have the majority of our slate remains the same from last year with a couple of changes. So I will be reading through the slate for this year. We do still have a couple of vacant seats that Leadership Council will continue to work through applications and ensure we get the right people into those seats based on our representation criteria. So there will be fewer names than the total kind of list of all the seats, but I will go through the vacant seats first and then through all of the leadership council members. So we have a youth with lived experience. That is an individual under age 30 who experienced homelessness as a youth or young adult. That seat is vacant. We also have a vacant seat representing workforce development and or education. And we have a vacant seat representing a funder. Next, we have our appointed seats. And so these are seats that are not selected through the representation matrix and application that we use to fill the majority of seats. So we have Diana Gray, who is the appointed representative for the Homeless Strategy Office. We have Dylan Shubitz, who is the appointed representative of the Housing Authority. We have an appointed seat for a public housing representative. That could be Travis County or City of Austin. Dylan is with Housing Authority of the City of Austin. We have Kathy McLaughlin, who is not here with us today, but she is the appointed representative for Travis County. And then we have our appointed representative for the Equity Office, the City Equity Office, who will now be Amanda Jasso, who will be a new member. Onto elected seats, we have our HUD-funded provider seat, that is Jason Phillips from Caritas. We have our representative of a non-HUD-funded provider, Emily Seals. Whitney Thurman is our healthcare and disability representative. Ruth Ahern is our mental health and substance use representative. We have Tiffany Hart in one of the lived experience seats, Richard Johnson Jr. in the other lived experience seat. And then we have two other seats that are kind of flexible, used for community advocates. And those are filled by Quincy Dunlap of the Urban League and JP Connolly from the Austin Justice Coalition. So that is our slate upcoming, again, with 3 vacancies. And so at this point, I ask if anyone has an objection to this slate for Leadership Council for the coming year. Please speak up now. And I'll give you all a moment. You can unmute or you can put it in the chat.
Sorry, I have a scratchy throat. I was taking the lived expertise seat for like being homeless as youth, just to clarify.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning.
Who is the person filling the lived expertise seat for youth homelessness?
So that is one of our 3 vacant seats.
Sorry, I'm trying to speak over my sore throat. Is that, our application still open for that, or is that just going to be left vacant?
No, applications are absolutely still open for all 3 vacant seats. I will put the link in the chat now for the application. Leadership Council is reviewing applications on a rolling basis. We do have certain kind of representation criteria to meet for filling these vacant seats. Yes, absolutely apply, and you can apply for more than 1 seat if there's anyone on this call who feels they would be qualified to represent multiple of these seats.
So when should an application be put in? Is there like, I guess there might not be a due date, but like an ideal time to have it all in, I guess.
So it's all rolling, and folks can also apply for seats that are currently filled. We hold on to all applications, and so if at a later date a member transitions off of Leadership Council, we can hold applications for all relevant seats. So there's no deadline or due date.
Okay, thank you, Maya.
Yeah. Any other questions or objections? All right, then I think I will take this as a consensus amongst the 60-something folks in here to approve the Leadership Council slate for this year. So congratulations, everybody, and thank you. And I will pass this off to Matt to close this out.
Thanks, Maya, and really appreciate everybody who just want to take a minute and thank everyone who put this together today. So I want to call out or call in Summer for your work to organize this, and Maya, and for the research and evaluation team who presented, and for those on Leadership Council who provided their expertise, and the folks at Travis County for their presentation. Also to congratulate the Slate, newly elected Slate, and to thank those that have spent the last year building the Leadership Council infrastructure and in the committee infrastructure that's in place around our governance. So I think, I really appreciate the time to make some comments at the end of this meeting. So I want to talk a little bit about last week, a court with the majority of justices appointed by presidents receiving a minority of votes in their elections and handpicked by a minority rule in the Senate, decided to overturn Roe v. Wade, setting aside decades of precedent and the rights so many have now taken for granted. Who knows where this will go next? Contraception, rights of same-sex couples to marry, the rights of LGBTQ persons more broadly. This is the same court that decided last week the Second Amendment allows people to carry concealed guns anywhere without restriction, regardless of the carnage it may engender. It is a court that held the protections of the Voting Rights Act were no longer needed because voting rights were not at risk by states that have historically restricted access to the ballot by majority non-white Americans. It is a court that has protected political gerrymandering, allowing the minority to secure majority rights. It is a court that allows corporations and wealthy individuals to spend their fortunes to determine the outcome of elections, overshadowing the voices of those with less resource. Yes, it has indeed been a disheartening and hurtful last week, preempted by a traumatic several years. Many on this call know all too well that the injustice brought to light over the last several years represents a lifetime of racist and sexist policy and law meant to oppress and maintain order and power for those whose privilege allows it. Many on this call will remind us that last week will not be the last time the pain of this injustice will be felt. Those who believe in the rights of poor and marginalized individuals and community, the rights of all races and ethnicities to the full protections of our Constitution, and the need to protect our most cherished rights must take action to push back against the rule of the minority. We must work to ensure that these actions do not result in denial of access to basic human rights of healthcare and housing. We talk about system intersection a lot in this work. The idea of system intersection speaks to two or more systems coming together for a period of time, then diverging again. You all have been working for housing justice long enough to name these systems: criminal justice, healthcare, foster care, juvenile justice, child protective services, support for people who use drugs, supporting women's reproductive rights, and many more. Now is the time to merge our work and advocacy for more just systems and a more just society. Through the work of our Leadership Council and all of you on this call, we're working to join together as a stakeholder group that understands our causes are inextricably linked, and the people we are fighting alongside for justice in our various systems many times are the same people and families who find themselves entrenched across several systems mentioned above that cause deep trauma and harm. So a call to action now is to bring your allies and colleagues from these adjacent systems and welcome them into our work and to be active and present in theirs. Welcome them in to merge and not intersect, begin working with them for the long haul to dismantle the harm our systems have caused that we have been a part of. Fight for the justice of people ensnared in their systems with the same tenacity you fight alongside people experiencing homelessness on our streets and in our shelters. Because as we know, they are many of the same people. I would challenge us all to make connections and organize with people and organizations fighting for system justice, to grow our stakeholder group so that our fall meeting begins to demonstrate the full breadth of our network. Thanks for all the work that you do and continue to do on behalf of people experiencing homelessness in our community. And I look forward to working alongside you for years to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. And I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care.